Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for the third edition of the Tehran Summit titled Catonic Realism, Summoning Ghosts on Wednesdays. My name is Afam Yassi, and I'm the co-creator of the Summit '02 alongside Uno Matisse and Yerede. This third summit is a collaboration with Pachinko, an artist-run space based in Oslo, led by Matilda Karbel and Christian Schroeder. I would like to also thank the Friedord Foundation and Art Council Norway for their generous support. The Tehran Summit is an independent artist-run project based in Tehran. Due to travel restrictions to Iran, we utilize online platforms to invite prominent international artists and thinkers from diverse backgrounds to share and exchange ideas. Over the next 7 nights, now 4 nights, we will gather for a series of Shab Neshini, which is a Farsi word for soirees, to listen to the invited guest speakers. It is my greatest honor to welcome you to the 5th night of the series of Shab Neshini, and to host none other than Shumon Basar. According to ChatGPT, Shumon Basar is a British writer, editor, and cultural critic known for his work at the intersection of contemporary culture, technology, and society. He often explores themes related to the digital age, globalization, and the future of cities and human identity. Basar has co-authored notable books such as The Age of Earthquakes, A Guide to the Extreme Present, and The Extreme Self, Age of You, which delve into how digital technologies and the internet are reshaping human experience and social norms. In addition to his writing, Basar is active in the arts and design worlds, frequently collaborating with institutions, museums, and other cultural entities. He has held various academic and curatorial positions, including roles at the AA School of Architecture in London and the Global Art Forum in Dubai. Basar's work is recognized for its insightful commentary on contemporary issues and its ability to synthesize complex ideas into accessible narratives. I personally cannot think of inviting anyone more suited to the format of the Tehran Summit, which is the virtual gathering, and all the socio-political circumstances of Iran and the Middle East that have led me to choose the virtual realm over the actual one, than Shumon Basar. I'm so happy that you are with us tonight, Shumon, and the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you so much. And GPT did a pretty good job, actually. I'm impressed. Up till a few years ago, when you put my name into Google, which is obviously a very cringe thing to do, one of the things that comes up very high is Shumon Basar's wife, and which means people have been Googling that. And then when I click on that, it usually just gives me a set of pictures of me with various female friends, none of whom are my wife or now ex-wife. So anyway, I think that GPT is they're doing better than Google at the moment anyway. Thank you, Irfan, and to Pachinko for the invite. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so yeah, I've never been to Tehran. I've always wanted to go. I hope there will still be an occasion to come, and that the context improves in seismic ways from what it is today. I'd like to start with a very small disclaimer, which may be self-evident to some of you and maybe not to others, but in my mind and in my heart, there's a world before October the 7th, and there's a world after October the 7th. And I don't just mean this in geopolitical or historical terms. I mean this in a very simple personal sense, that it's an epistemic and emotional fault line, and it's littered with many broken illusions. And I'm the first to also admit that I think those illusions may have been well and truly broken for many other people before that date or before this time. And so there may be a sense in which myself and other people are sort of catching up. So what I'm going to talk about today consists of two parts. The first presents a set of thoughts that predate October the 7th, while the second part is a representation of my preoccupations over the last 7.5 months or so. I do believe that they're related, but I'm interested in you making the connections more than me showing you how to do that. So now that that disclaimer is out of the way, let's get going. So in late in 2022, I was asked by Zora Zine to be their new curator-in-residence. 2022 was, at least for me, full of extremely intense feels. I don't think I was the only one feeling this. We were emerging from what I call the corona scene, from the COVID pandemic era. And we were emerging changed. So did the world. History is littered with these reset moments. Technology often emerges from these moments, or technology engraves these moments. I told my colleagues at Zora Zine that I wanted to develop a trilogy. And the name of this trilogy would be Lorecore, Lorecore. And somewhere in the feed, I read that, quote, researchers warn of model collapse as AI trains on AI-generated content, end quote. I spent 2.7 seconds on this notion, the same time that the artist Jeff Koons says people spend looking at one of his artworks, and the feed continued, or I continued. It's a queasy parallax feeling. It's as ambiguous as situationships are, when they don't seem to ever begin, but they certainly come to an end. This is how the feed feels to me, and how I feel to the feed. The feed feeds the way feelings feel. It's hard to say that. Let me try and define Lorecore for you in approximately 2.7 seconds. So Lorecore is a noun, and it's an era belonging to digital capitalism, characterized by people's existential need to storify themselves at the moment many received global narratives collapse in an unprecedented manner. So Lorecore is the name that I'm giving to this prevalent stage of reality where we're all characters who are also audiences. In 1921, the playwright Luigi Pirandello wrote a play called 6 Characters in Search of an Author. It was an early example of metafiction, where the story is acutely aware that it's a story, and it keeps reminding you of the mechanics of storytelling. In the 2020s, I'd rename Pirandello's play thus: 8 billion people in search of Lorecore. So Lorecore is yet another portmanteau. A portmanteau is when two words are spliced together like an ancient mythical creature. Let's take the first half, lore, L-O-R-E. Lore is collectively produced myth and metamyth around someone or something. But I'd like to calibrate this to also refer to our ubiquitous obsessive reliance on narrative and meta-narrative. During one of your bouts of self-diagnosis, perhaps you realized you suffered from main character syndrome, MCS. Everything is about you. It revolves around you, your innermost thoughts, your outermost actions, all of which must be documented, time-stamped, and uploaded for archival reasons. Your social media feeds are a factory of myth-making. Law is the new myth you make about yourself. But where do I end and where does my law begin? For the second half of Lorecore's etymology, let's compare how long art movements in the 20th century used to last, decades, compared to the lifespan of memes. Now, memes barely last days. Against this punishing pro-acceleration is the desire to label every micro subcultural moment on the internet. Everything is a core. If it isn't a core, it didn't happen. Cores are like screenshots as trends. And once the core is indexed, archived, you just move on. Feed gymnastics, training one's brain, often unknowingly or unintendedly, by spending excessive amounts of time absorbing information via online news or social media feeds. At the start of the Corona scene, global narrative collapse was this dizzy, vertiginous feeling, especially in the middle-class West. And it was caused by a sense of normalcy suddenly caving in. Planes were grounded, hard national borders went up, places of work closed down indefinitely, and French kissing was considered an act of homicide. My marriage collapsed. I missed the horizon of the future. Would it ever come back? And next week became as unknowable as next year. At the end of 2022, permacrisis became the Collins Dictionary word of the year. Just as one crisis erupts, such as droughts, stampedes, plagues, there's yet another one vying for attention. The thing is, every crisis is a collapsed narrative. Weakened supply chains, irreversible climate change, the return of nuclear war, negative birth rates, live stream genocide. One of the greatest narratives to have collapsed is the West's immunity from the horrors that have plagued much of the rest of the world. Sweltering heat waves, energy shortages, monetary failures. It's what I call the third worlding of the first world. Everyone lives it, just read the headlines. And what I call headline myopia is when the headline is the message, the whole message. For many of us, there's PTSD, not the one that you're probably familiar with, but this one, which is present traumatic stress disorder. It's the cumulative psychological effect of too much change vertigo and too much reality lag. And this is often quickly followed by impotence in relation to that low-level constant anxiety. As we become less powerful, do we become more Lorecore? Lorecore is thus entwined with these macro-historic conditions. During Lorecore, we tend to overshare our innermost psychological and emotional details to a world that's already drowning in too much intimacy. Lorecore is what happens when feelings legitimize lies and when markets, especially crypto markets, are maniacally moved by what I call meme lords technologians, and more on this shortly. But perhaps Lorecore is just the latest survival mechanism in an open sea of meaning unmoored from itself. As Freud once opined, fantasy realized has a name, nightmare. I get ads in my feed about ADHD, and friends tell me they are ADHD, which is the kind of anxiety, anxiety disorder. It's as if their brains have as many browser tabs open as I do on this laptop. They're told that they live in the attention economy, but they struggle to hold attention for very long. Blip, gone. It's okay, I assure them. We actually live in the distraction economy. So the distraction economy is the attention economy rebranded to more accurately describe the working mechanism and goals of it. That of harnessing people's weakness for endless dopamine-driven distraction. So again, for a number of years, we've been told that what is being fought over is our attention. But I would argue it's actually our distraction that's the real resource that is being fought over, particularly by platform capitalism. In Lorecore, pathologies are identity-forming powers. They're tools to discover your atypical kin. We are finding community and meaning through the process of self-diagnosis, such as, and so this is something I call crowd coping, which is when you seek solace by seeing one's own fears and doubts prevalently played out by a visible and numerous public. So storifying your specific lack or your specific pathology is now a kind of alpha law. But however, Lorecore's leaders refute victim status. Many of them are very open about their neurological struggles. Lorecore loves winners that in previous times may well have been tragically cast as losers. And here, perhaps I might add that, you know, just going back a few decades ago, it would have felt that if you suffered from even something like ADHD or certainly autism or depression, that these were things that you would, that there would be a huge amount of shame around these things. And you would be consciously and unconsciously guided to do everything in your power to hide these conditions or these qualities of your personality. And I feel that that's something that has, you know, those magnetic poles have shifted now. And the fact that we can self-diagnose collectively with everybody who's online, I think is one of the reasons that that is now the case. But this plays a role in the kind of pathologization, I think, of many of the people who are leading these major technologies that we use. And I call them wizards and charismatics, because every era has its magic individuals. They're endowed with special powers of sight or insight. They channel the culture, and they often tell the culture truths about itself that it doesn't know or is too afraid to ask. So in the past, magic individuals have arrived as poets, composers, scientists, novelists, or artists. There was always a next big thing out there waiting to hit us and change the way that we understood the world. Magic individuals pointed to them and they would say, look, it's over there. Lately, though, it feels as if tech is already the next big thing, and then the next big thing, plus the big thing that comes after that big thing. Tech is the ultimate modern magic. This makes technologians the magic individuals of Lorecore. They're figures of extraordinary persuasion and therefore of extraordinary power. Matt Dryhurst told me that the current world is increasingly run by shitposters. They're agents of chaos cosplaying as billionaire CEOs. Another law of Lorecore is that the dumbest plotline is probably what's going to happen next. The only intelligent people left on Earth will be highly paid prompt engineers who know exactly how to phrase a string of words such that the AI spits out the perfect generative video of orcas attacking tech billionaires on their luxury yachts to the music of Apocalypse Now. Now, elsewhere, I've written about what I call the dawn of Endcore. And Endcore is the name that I'm giving to this era after the end of eras, after the end of history. And history here is spelled without the vowels, so it's HSTRY. Endcore is the feeling that we're in the end game now, the end game of climate grief, of techno-capitalism, of consensus-based empirical truth, and maybe also of decency. So what I call decency sacrifice. This is the loss of human decency as our collateral damage for the gift of technological progress. So is this the end? Has the end finally come? No one is sure exactly when it's happening. We did not know what the end would be like. Could it be here now? You know the future is happening when you start feeling scared. Did you know that the word future arrives in the European languages during the late 14th and then 15th centuries? It's consonant with the age of European imperial colonialism. Upon arriving at their New World destination, the colonists would label the indigenous people savage or slave or infidel, anything that ensured that they were not entitled to what would later be called the human that we have inside human rights. So the future here was inextricable from a global project of dehumanization, a collapse of equality through the introduction of Enlightenment categories. So again, many of you will know this, but one of the hallmarks of the sort of science or the modern sciences that we have, particularly from the 16th and 17th century onwards, is that of taxonomization. The idea which we would then bloom into sort of Darwinianism, that you're able to sort of trace back philologically and explain the kind of the numerous differences that we have today in species and in subspecies, etc. And so this sense of taxonomization and categorization is really a very central instrument of European modernity. And this is something that is also weaponized in the project of colonialism, European colonialism, as it sort of disseminates across the world and finds new territories to conquer. So the future is always one driven narrative imposed upon other narratives, who get little or no say in whether they want to be part of that new next narrative. So the future is a practical joke that you have yet to acknowledge. Slavoj Žižek calls the recent geopolitical era hot peace, a state of permanent hybrid war in which military interventions are declared under the guise of peacekeeping and humanitarian missions. We could also call this Endcore. US serviceman Aaron Bushnell sets himself on fire in front of the embassy of Israel in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago. Soon after, a police officer aims his gun at this fusion of flesh, flame, and unimaginable pain. This is one image that appeared in my feed, among others, labeled, quote, images that ended the West. People are keeping receipts. So at some point in the last decade, I think images stopped working as images used to. I know what an image looks like today. I know how they circulate, how they are currency and fuel, palliative for sore eyes. But no single image can stop the river of the feed, drain it of its compulsion towards procession. Images promise us that they're still images, but images are just unlasting alibis in our anorexic ruins. And here, maybe just a pause to think about the fact that if you think about the history of photojournalism, particularly of war photojournalism, I saw the recent Alex Garland movie, maybe some of you have, called Civil War, which is in a way a lament for the time when photojournalism and war photojournalism could have a kind of some sort of decisive impact on wars, on the executions of war, and on the kind of illegality, legally or morally, and so you think about, or I again, if you're of a certain generation, you'll think about certain images, the very famous images of the girl during the Vietnam War, during a napalm attack. And there was a sense in which these images, in a kind of Barthian sense, could act as, potentially have the power to act as kind of punctum that could literally sort of deflate a sort of hegemonic political narrative that would be spewed by a sort of warring party. But I think it's impossible today, and again, I'm going to talk about this, that any one image would have that kind of effect. And I think there are many of us who felt, certainly over the last several months, that we'll see a particular kind of image of an atrocity or a horror, and we just think, okay, this is it. No, this is that image that's going to have this like seismic paradigm shift effect, and of course it doesn't. And so that's one way in which I think images simply aren't what they used to be, and don't have the kind of singular power that they did, but arguably they have a sort of different power, and the power is in the procession of images, right? And the procession of images that takes place in the feed. So in his recent piece, The Shoah After Gaza, published in the London Review of Books, Pankaj Mishra writes, "We find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. Never before have so many witnessed an industrial scale slaughter in real time. Every day is poisoned by the awareness that while we go about our lives, hundreds of ordinary people like ourselves are being murdered or forced to witness the murder of their children." Scenes continue each day where Gazans are trapped under buildings that have been unbuildinged, under the rubble. We don't know how many. And the rubble has chromatically terraformed the land. As somebody wrote, Gaza is now a different color from space. It's a different texture. So I've been thinking a lot about this figure and the substance of the rubble, and it's one of the many instantiations of evil that's gifted with absolute impunity. And if we think about transgression and what transgression really means, either in the mortal realm or in the immortal sphere, transgression is only transgression when there are laws to transgress. And without laws, barbarism stands as civilization, and psychopathy stands as personality. And is there a more impotent phrase now than international law? Genocide, the crime of crimes, is all powerful against international law when the correct consensus is aligned to support that genocide. The so-called rules-based order is now being undermined by the very authors of its architecture several decades ago. And again, to reiterate what I said at the beginning, pity those of us who had any illusions in the first place. So Israel is in a process of normalizing ultraviolence by layering horrific images on top of obscene images every single day, like rubble on top of rubble, demanding us to exhaust our empathy as our retinal senses burn from images of suffering. The more we see, the less things change. The more we witness, the less language suffices. The more I post, the less I want to have to post. As Naomi Klein put it, ever since 9/11, with environmental disasters occurring close up, not far away, rich countries have been seeking security without peace and justice. Israel, which does not recognize any international legal framework, indeed, we're seeing today how they are enraged, on the one hand, enraged, but also completely ignoring the fact that three major European countries have acknowledged or the state of Palestine today. So Israel is a neo-colonial microcosm of so-called security without peace and justice. So if we think about major narratives today, major law, then arguably I think one of the major geopolitical narratives is this idea of security without peace and justice. This has created a mirror world where words now mean their opposite. Ceasefire means supporting terrorism. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Aggressor is victim. At a recent event called AI Expo for National Competitiveness, held in Washington, D.C., Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir, which is a prominent software company that's been supplying some of its AI products to the Israeli Defense Force, Alex Karp referred to the students protesting on university campuses as so he was talking about them, and then he said, the peace activists are war activists. We are the peace activists, as in Palantir. It's a really amazing, but also just brutally blunt example of this kind of inversion logic. The peace activists are war activists. We are the peace activists. Even George Orwell would think it's all too implausible. Fire the fucking writing team. Back to Zizek's phrase, hot peace. There's a fundamental violence to the word peace. The weaponization of peace is actually a perpetual project of violence. Capitalist violence, trade violence, symbolic violence, cultural violence, and so on. An over there versus an over here. There's no limit to the violence that can be perpetrated in the name of peace. Every crisis is a collapsed narrative, he tells her. The future is but the obsolete in reverse, she opines. Endings may offer the promise of salvation, redemption, even liberty, but they're also exhausting. Throughout this talk, you will have seen me present these different neologisms and sort of and quote from them. So they're all from the second installment of my Lorecore trilogy, and I call this the lexicon of Lorecore. There are 53 new structures of feelings that I believe demanded new words, and and I really believe that new words frame new eras. And we could talk about this more if you'd like to, but I'm a firm believer that there's great power to naming things. Equally, there's great power sometimes to not be able to name them. So perhaps we could discuss that as well. So this is the last part of what I would like to talk about today. So while working on the lexicon, I came across the work of a duo based in Manchester, England, called Y7. And they specialize in theory and audiovisual work. They were advertising a forthcoming reading and listening session around my Endcore and Lorecore texts. So we started messaging. We half joked about the advent of something called Promptcore in light of the Moncler Pope and fake Drake and the entire shift to large language model driven generated content. And we agreed, and maybe some of you would agree as well, that most of this has been extremely uninspiring and unimaginative. But the implications of Promptcore are potentially profound. around the same time or soon after, the artist Emma Stern sent me a word that I think is very relevant here, and perhaps you'll find it interesting, and that is technopomorphism. Technopomorphism. So if you think about the word anthropomorphism, it's the opposite of anthropomorphism. So technopomorphism is when humans start thinking and acting like machines. There's this Chinese speed posing model who's become very famous in the last year or so. This one in particular, but there are others, but this one's very, very famous. And she moves in sort of precise synchronization with the camera click, delivering digital-ready images for the vast fashion content volume, right? So there's something, so here we're seeing an example of, you know, a sort of offline, off-screen body training itself in a way that maximizes its sort of efficiency and its power for a kind of machine dissemination. So to finish up today, I'd like to introduce the final installment of my Lorecore trilogy. It's a film I made in collaboration with Hannah and Declan from Y7. How it worked was that I wrote a script, quite a traditional film script, with locations and characters and dialogue and setting descriptions. I then gave this to Hannah and Declan, and they used the script as a prompt, essentially as a kind of mega prompt. So they then generated the visuals, the voices, the faces, the music, using multiple, about 11, I think, different generative AI tools and software. And, you know, question here, is this a new kind of filmmaking? So the premise of this, what I call a short feature film, is an alternative Love Island reality dating show at the end of the internet, and you will see a sort of a tethering to what was at the time, this was late last year, a sort of an expectation of a solar of a kind of cataclysmic solar event, which interestingly enough just recently happened in the last couple of weeks with those of you who saw the kind of amazing northern lights that descended much lower than they normally would do. But anyway, we could talk about that in afterwards. So it's about 8 minutes long. Hope you enjoy it. Here we go.
Hello and welcome to the season finale of Law Island. I'm your host, Lulu Max, but you can call me LLM. How about a recap? It all began 8 days ago. 8 girls, 8 boys in a secluded luxury island resort in the middle of absolutely nowhere. These were our kings and queens of the Riz. Ever since then, Law Island has put them to the test. Our guests had to invent the most incredible things about themselves based on keywords you sent us through your socials, made up main character plots, outrageous lies designed to seduce via the DMs. But here's the thing, no one on Law Island can use their own names. Everyone is a spicy anon. You get to see all their conversations all of the time. Think of it as 24-hour intimate access. At night, as a treat, our girls and boys chilled out by the awesome infinity pool. But the rules say you can't give away which anon you've been all day long, just like in real life. So thank you, viewers, for voting off the contestants with the weakest Lorecore. 14 down, 2 to go. Shall we go meet our finalists?
Hi, my name is Core, C-O-R-E. What do? People pay to watch me sleep online for hours. It's not as easy as it sounds. Beyond the money, which is great, thank you very much. Sleeping in front of tens of thousands of people helps me cope with a lot of anxieties. Don't get me wrong, anxieties can be hot.
Hey, my name is Law. What can I say? Got into prompting by accident, and then it just kind of became like an addiction. People think prompting is just a speaking machine. It isn't. It's way more like poetry. Sometimes I can't believe I'm living this dream. That's so cringe. It's like I tell my bros, you know the future is happening when you start feeling scared. Am I scared? Yeah, I'm scared of losing. It's okay though. I've never lost in my whole life. Prompting is winning.
Meanwhile, Core and Law are all alone on the island. They're busy on their final challenge. Invent a crazy new dating show format for humans and avatars. Who chooses the winner? All our boys and girls previously kicked out. How is that for karma? My feed is being flooded with one breaking news story.
A severe solar storm is approaching Earth. The scale is unprecedented. Immense magnetic fields will rip through Earth's magnetosphere. It is highly likely to disrupt satellites, radio signals, and undersea cables. This is the internet apocalypse the world has feared for decades. The imminent catastrophe may last months. It will plunge us and all our communication infrastructure offline. Nobody knows what the full outcome will look like.
Wait, look. Core and Law still think the thousands of cameras rigged on the island are still filming them, but they aren't. Whole dark black emptiness suddenly turns into a million aurora borealis. Every screen on Earth is now frozen. I'm swiping and I'm scrolling, and there's nothing new. There's no more content. It's the strongest feeling of grief I've ever encountered.
Lore,
What?
I miss the feed. I miss the feeling I get inside the feed.
That was the end of my talk. Thank you very much.